Today's song I ain't got the license to is Catch the Wind by Donovan. It went something along. Dun 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 dun. I may as well try and catch the wind. That was nicer than pictures falling in. They look like leaves. Hey, jump inside. Let's go on a paper route.
Welcome to the Wrecking Yard. I'm Jerry Wayne Longmire. It's a wet morning here in Houston, Texas, so you might be able to hear the rain pitter-pattering on this roof here. It's not coming down too hard, so we're just going to roll with it. See how it goes. I wanted to record yesterday, but whew, buddy, it was coming down pretty good. Hope you guys have had a good week. As always, I'll tell you, you're better off to go watch the first episode if you haven't seen any of these before, and it'll help you understand the format a little better. And if you have been watching all along, or if you're caught up, well, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. I appreciate you sharing some of your Sunday with me. Today's episode's gonna be a little fun. We went through a lot last week, I know, and I feel like I need to address that. I wasn't aware of how raw I was going to get telling that story, and it's okay. I don't feel bad about that. If it, especially if it makes anybody feel better about what they're going through, certainly that's the intended goal and desire. But I didn't, last week I told you what happened to my mom, but I didn't really get to tell you about my mom, and that does a bit of an injustice to her. And I told you I couldn't do all that back to back because, honestly, spoiler alert, I'll tell you, in the second part of the GMC, my father-in-law passes away, and it's equally hard for other reasons, and I have a pretty nasty accident, and it's just, things get a little rough in the second part of the GMC. But these are real stories. These aren't, I'm not concocting these to provide some kind of narrative or something. So, unfortunately, there's just a lot of rough stuff that happened in that time period. And, there's some rough stuff that happens in this one today. But I will tell you, nobody's going to die. So there's that. We ain't got nothing to cry about today. We're going to talk about great things, actually. I had a lot of fun mining the memories for this because I wasn't joking. I don't say that, to be emotional. My mom's really my best friend. She made being a kid fun. And she was absolutely the best part of my childhood. So I'm really excited to talk about her little car today because it's kind of a cool little time period for us. I mean, I didn't, of course, know it at the time. This is like, this is about 1982. And we lived on the back of the wrecking yard. This is that time period when we lived at the back of my papa. If you go east, you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll jump back into this. But I'm a little scattered this morning. You have to bear with me. I'm also compiling notes. I'm doing some stand-up tonight and compiling some notes about that. So I'm a little scattered. But because you guys and your feedback, as I've been writing these and creating these, I'm actually going to take some of this on stage with me as a part of my new comedy special, which I thought I had already written until we started doing this together. And now I'm like, man, there's all this great stuff I have in mind and all these great things that people really relate to that is what I really need to be delving into. So that's where the best comedy comes from. For example, tonight I'm closing out a show in Houston, Texas. You wouldn't get this in time to see this because the time y'all see this it'd be Sunday. But today's Saturday where I'm at, and tonight I'm headlining a show in Houston, and it's a cool hip crowd, and but it's a great experimental room. It's a great place to work out new stuff. It's a hip crowd. They understand what's going on. So tonight I'm going to take Harry on stage for the first time. So you guys over here for the story about Harry. It's a 100% true story. So I spent the last week trying to make it funny, you know, or a little more punchy. And I'm gonna take Harry on stage tonight, so I'm kind of excited about that. I got a little anxiety about it because it's a very close personal part of my story, but I'm hoping it goes well. So we'll see. You know, Harry either will or will not be part of the special. You never can tell. It'd be wild if it was like some elaborate hoax from the people at McDonald's and Harry is like a real dude and just shows up at a show one day. I'd probably crap myself, to be honest with you. Lord Jesus, not now. Ain't my time. No, get him out of here. That's funny. That might go in the bit. I like that. That just came. That's cool. Y'all are catching me on a groovy morning. I'm feeling really good. I've lost some more weight. I'm not gonna say how much more because I'm not really like scaling it, but I found a bunch of clothes that didn't fit because I had gained so much weight during the pandemic, and all those clothes are fitting good. And so, you know, it gives you a little boost. Put you on. I have not been able to wear this shirt in years. It's one of my favorite shirts. So, love the Hulk. That's my favorite Marvel heroes, the Hulk. Anyway, I was a comic book kid. We'll get into that. We'll get into that here pretty quick. Before we go too much farther, this is where my sponsor would be. And I decided until I pick up a sponsor, I'm going to do something kind of weird here. I'm going to promote people I have done business with and I have a lot of faith and trust in. These are not people that are paying me. These are not people that ask to be sponsors. But they're just people I've done business with over the years and I have seen nothing but good things out of. So today, if you're in the Houston area, the Conroe, Montgomery area, and you have a pest problem, I want to recommend Wildlife Removal Experts LLC. And I'm not kidding when I say Tim Moss, the man that owns that, Wildlife Removal Experts LLC, that man's Diamond Gem certified. I guarantee you. He's one of the best human beings I've ever known. I really love the guy. He did some things for me when I needed work. He gave me some work. Me and him used to, we used to give each other work and stuff. And Tim has just consistently, he was part of a business network I was in when I started my business in like 2017, one of my other businesses. And he was in one of those business networks with me, and that's how I met him. And you know, those things are kind of rah-rah, support everybody's business. Everybody here is a great businessman, which is not usually the case. And usually those things are just a cash grab. Now this particular one wasn't, it was actually people trying to promote their business. And I met some dear friends through it. But Tim Moss was one of them. Tim Moss and me did lots of things together. I made a driveway for his property. I did some jobs for him over the years. But Tim, I would call Tim anytime one of my customers had a serious pet. If they had snakes, if they had whatever, Tim's your guy. It doesn't matter. You got a rhinoceros in your attic, you call Tim Moss. I guarantee he's seen it before. He's probably hoisted one out. Tim, he's an ex-Marine, you know, and all his dudes are like veterans. He hires combat veterans. And I've seen, he's just one of the best people around to do business with. He's going to treat you fair. He's going to give you a reasonable price. But more than that, when he gets rid of the pest problem, he's going to make sure it don't come back. And that's where he really comes in. This dude fights raccoons in attics. You know, raccoons is related to bears. We've talked about raccoons before. And Tim Moss climbed up in the attic with a raccoon, no problem. You know, he's a tough bird. So if you got a pest problem, you got bees, you got whatever you got, whoever's coming in your house ain't supposed to be there. I don't. If it's Jehovah's Witness, he might be able to get rid of them. I don't know. But call Wildlife Removal Experts LLC. I've done business with them for close to 13, 12 years now. And I've never been disappointed, and neither have any of my customers. That's my sponsorship today. Diamond Gem certified, Wildlife Removal Experts LLC. You can find them on Facebook. They're kind of a fun page to follow because they show some videos of their captures and teach you some stuff about wildlife and snakes and things like that here in Texas. Boom. Ooh, that felt good. That made me feel good to do that. I like that. I want to feel what it'd feel like to have a sponsor. And I like supporting people I know are good people, you know. All right. Before we go too much farther, let's get in some comments from last week. And the comments from last week really made me. Some of them made me cry because they were heartbreakingly sad, and it also made me feel better to know that I'm not one of the. There's a lot of people been through the same stuff. I think that makes us feel better sometimes. It doesn't solve the problem, but knowing there's other people out there on the same plane as you going through the same struggle really, I think, lessens the burden somehow. All right, so here we go. Okay, sorry. I was trying to read this name. It's BKRGLS. Another great podcast, Jerry. I really appreciate you telling your fans that you love us, and I have a lot of respect for you for that. So sorry about your mom's passing. I know how it feels not to be yourself after losing a loved one. Some of you gets lost, and it's a struggle to try and put yourself back together. I shed some tears while listening tonight, but it's all good. Glad that you met your Harry, because we all need to meet our Harry. I'm not a religious person, but I consider myself spiritual and believe in God. I don't think you're crazy at all. I learned from being a truck driver and working at a guard shack. Sometimes all it takes is a good conversation. If not a good conversation, just be a genuine listener. And it's crazy how kids can say things that blow your mind because of their innocence. Oh, buddy, if I had my kid, I hope neither one of my kids ever decide to be stand-up comics, because I might have to quit because they're so much funnier than I am. I also hope they don't become stand-up comics, because it'll mean I screwed up somewhere. Sorry, Dad. Anyways, yeah, man, I do love you guys. The kind of support I get from y'all and the feedback and stuff, it makes me feel good. I love you guys, and I don't think there's enough love in the world. And I also don't think there's enough men like me, men's men, that tell the people around them how much they do love them and care for them. So I try to do more of that, and I try to do a lot of it with my kids. And I will say my dad was very good about that, but his father wasn't. I've been around a lot of people who didn't do it. And so that's just my little thing, that I like to share the love. So sorry about your mom's fast. Yeah, I mean, brother, it was, what are we going on now? 13, 15 years, something like that. I don't know. Maybe 12 years, 11 years. I can't remember. Time's a bastard. And here's the thing. When you're going through that thing, you think you'll never get over it. You think you will never be right again. And time just doesn't work that way. Things fade. Memories fade. I enjoyed writing for this podcast because I got to remember the fun side of her, and not just think about the sad part. And all that stuff fades. And wounds hurt less over time. Time heals all. Isn't that the thing? Time heals all wounds. So it's not as hard anymore. It was hard going through that and talking about it, but it's not like a daily, like I don't wake up every day and cry because of her. But every once in a while, if I'm at a Mexican food restaurant or something and they're playing Cher, and my mom loved music, so we'll talk about that anyway. If I hear the wrong song, I forgot where we were. I think we were at a Mexican food restaurant in Houston, and it's kind of a, hip, modern place or whatever. Anyways, they were playing Cher, If I Could Turn Back Time. I just start bawling in a Mexican food restaurant because that's my mom loved Cher, and I remember the waiter was very concerned, and I was like, no. I was like, I lost somebody, and I guess he misunderstood me, and he thought I said Cher was dead, or that Cher had died, because he got really emotional about it. Apparently, he was a big fan too, and we cried together for a little bit. It was a good time. Anyways, I highly recommend Spanish Flowers. Good restaurant. There's my other non-sponsor, Spanish Fires. Boy, you like yourself some cheese enchiladas. That's a place to go. Let's see. I wanted to go through that. Somebody gets lost, struggle. But glad you met your Harry. I'm glad I met my Harry too. We'll see if I ever see Harry again. And my kids, boy, my oldest has said some things to me over the years that have had me. One time, when they were like 4, they told me we were playing with lightsabers. We all love Star Wars in my family. We're Star Wars guys, folks. And we were playing with lightsabers, and my oldest told me, it was about 4, jumped up my face, said, "You're no kind of African Jedi like I am." I fell off a couch, barking like a seal. It was hilarious. They say some weird stuff. Anyways, let's move on. Okay, so next comment that I picked for today. So these comments made me laugh, right? Because it was this very long, heart-rendering, emotional podcast. There was a great deal of it was about, this thing I went through with my mother. But Casey Berg, Kaysiburge, commented, "The color is pewter. I had a 2000 Chevrolet Z71 extended cab that was the same color. My biggest regret was selling it. Best truck I had." Right on, brother. I love that out of all the podcasts, when I was struggling to remember what the name of the color of the truck was, Casey hung on to that, and he was there for me. He showed up with the information I need. Everybody else, which is great, and I do appreciate all that, telling me stories about their loved ones and such. Casey held on to the end of that podcast, showed up. "Hey, brother, it's pewter." I love you for that, Casey. It truly tickled the piss out of me. My biggest regret was selling it. Boy, I regret selling mine too. For a number of reasons. We'll get to that next week. But that was just a great little pickup, man. I could gush about that thing. Next comment from Noah Kiger, I don't know, NOAHKIGER 88. "Man, that paint and lacquer story is hilarious." That's not. It can't remind me of the pewter comment, because hopefully just like that was a fun thing to take away from that episode. That truly makes me laugh. I forgot I even told. I don't even know how I got on that story. Sometimes these things take me on trips to other stories and I don't, think about them. I just start telling them. But yeah, that was hilarious. What's funny is it ain't even the funniest lacquer story I've got. Because I have had some experiences with lacquer. I almost blew our whole house up one time when we lived in Willis. I had got into restoring old antique furniture and stuff for people. And I was doing it for all these, rich folks and stuff around the lakes. And Mr. Bob was a bit of a furniture collector. Mr. Bob was a bit of a furniture collector. And it was actually when I was paying for that truck, one of the things I did was restore a bunch of really nice old Hickory, North Carolina furniture from like turn of the century. Really cool stuff. Was it Chapel Hill, maybe? I don't know. I can't remember. Really, really nice stuff. Anyways, I had to do a bunch of research on it, learn how it was made. And of course, this was all lacquer furniture. So when he had let somebody borrow the furniture, use it in their house for a while, and they'd put candles on it, which don't do that. Not on anything with a wax finish or lacquer finish. Don't put a blasted candle on top of it and let drip hot wax on it and get it all hot and stuff. It just, it ain't made for that. Get you something under there to protect it from the heat. That kind of thing. Anyways, they'd use candle. They'd just ruin the top of this table. So I had to strip it down. Of course, re-sand it and, clean up all had a bunch of inlays in it and clean all that up and get all the dust out of it. Ooh, why is that eye leaking? Anyways, get all the dust out of it. And then I had to respray it with several coats of lacquer. And I was out there in my little garage and I had the garage door cracked, but it's kind of windy that day and I didn't want it blowing, and landscapers were mowing somebody's yard and I didn't want it blowing grass and crap all in my lacquer. So And I had a kind of a rudimentary operation, you know, and so I'm just in there and I got my mask on and I'm just spraying my lacquer. But as I told you, there ain't no amount of mask that can protect you from lacquer. Not that I've run across, especially when you got a beard like this. Some of it's going to seep in. You better be in a well-ventilated room. But ain't no fan going because I was worried about, you know, a little sparky spark and causing a problem, you know. I was already a little nervous every time the compressor kicked on. I'm out there just spraying these tables, right? I got them all kind of in a semicircle. Now, I used to smoke cigarettes back in. I'm sure you can tell where this is going. And I was spraying my lacquer. And I was listening to a Pandora radio station. It's kind of like an Appalachian station that's playing a bunch of, I really like bluegrass when I'm working. And like neotrad bluegrass and then actual traditional bluegrass. And I just like hillbilly music. I like that hill music. Probably in my blood, you know, it's where my people are from. At this point, I had never heard of Sturgill Simpson, actually. I didn't know who Sturgill Simpson was. This is how I found out who Sturgill Simpson was. So I'm out there spraying my lacquer, and the lacquer's getting to me, buddy. I'm feeling good, you know. I'm singing along. Old Benjamin Todd's on the radio, and I'm getting down, and I'm spraying my lacquer, and remembering the hard times and such. Times are going a little better. We've moved. This is after my mom has passed. You know, that's what I say. It's not a bad time. There was a lot of good times in that, and I'm going to talk more about those next week. I'm just spraying that lacquer, right? Listening to that music, having a good old time, and that lacquer's getting good to me, buddy. Whoo, it's getting good. That's a special feeling, you know. You just a little lightheaded, feeling pretty great about everything. And Sturgill Simpson covered an 80s song I love called "The Promise." I think it's by When in Rome. And that song starts playing, but I had never heard it before. And he does it this real slow, and he's got this big voice, and I promise, you know, like it's just very like, what is this? And when my ears picked up on the lyrics of what I was listening to, I just got giddy. I was like, what is this? This is the coolest thing I ever heard. So I'm just into it, right? Well, now I've done jumped off Pandora and I put it on my on my Apple Music. I'm listening to it about the third time. I'm in there lacquered up, just listening to Sturgill Simpson, feeling big feelings and having to think about my lady and how, you know, it's the promise. It's a love song. You know, I'm in it. And I was like, boy, you know, it'll go good right now. It's a good old Camel cigarette. And I thought about it I pulled my mask down. I pulled the cigarette out of the pack. And right when I struck the lighter, I looked at the thing of lacquer sitting by my compressor and went, and it was an instant fireball. My wife was at the other end of the house and she said the windows rattled. Well, I tell you, my beard looked like a poodle. It was like, like all my smell. Whoo, son. Now, unfortunately, I've caught my beard on fire a number of times. And, well, I could do a whole podcast about all the times I've caught my beard on fire. But that is a smell that don't go away, son. You got to trim all that fried up hair out of there. I didn't have crap for eyebrows left. I still think they're thin these days. I think if I had a hat on, I'd lose no hair. But it was instant fire. I was glad I had on my goggles still because it was just instant fire throughout that room. Right? But man, let me tell you, did it knock the garage door off? Is that when I knocked the garage door off track? I don't know. It did something. It messed up the garage door. Just the concussive impact of that boom. And my wife came running out there. I couldn't hear nothing. She's, you know, saying stuff to me from the door. I'm in one of them bomb scenes in a movie. I'm hearing, nee. But this here Sturgill Simpson's still playing, you know. And I remember, I finally, my hearing started coming back, and I looked at her. I was like, "Have you heard this song?" And she goes, "What are you talking about?" Whew! Be careful with lacquer, boys and girls. It can be dangerous. Bet you little furniture people working away in your little garages and your little spaces, you know, when you don't have a big enough space to work in. That stuff can get to you. But I can't tell you, man, I should post some pictures of those tables. I used to do some beautiful tables. Anyways, those tables are gorgeous. That finish of them tables come out beautiful. I don't know if the explosion finish is what did it, but I never had tables look as good as those did. So, you know, I wouldn't recommend it. Don't know if it helped. Most likely did not. All right, let's get off into it. Today's car is 1971 Volkswagen Super Beetle, and I'm going to tell you right here, right now, I am an unabashed fan of air-cooled VWs. Love them. Think I've loved them. I think VWs really are cars that made me a car guy. I think watching my dad take apart those cases and build those engines made me, I think that's one of the things that affected me a great deal. They're just so precise and interesting to me. Now, at this time, it's like 1982. So I'm like 5. I think I'm getting ready. My birthday's in the summer, so it's right after my first year of kindergarten. I'm probably about 5 years old. My sister was just born. She's a newborn. Yeah, we're about 5 years apart. She was born in 82. She was born in 81. No, she was born in 80. Yeah, she was born in 81. Sorry, I don't know nothing about nothing. I don't know how old my mom was at that, but I know my mom was young. My mom was very young when she had me. So she's probably, I gotta think, very early 20s at this point, 23, 22. And this little red 71 Super Beetle was a car that my dad had bought from somebody not running and fixed up and got it all good for my mom. And it was pretty sure it was a standard. Most of them were. My mom could drive anything though. She grew up in the wrecking yard, you know. And at this time period, we live in the wrecking yard. So if you're going down Highway 42 and you're headed into Kilgore from Overton, Texas, and about halfway there on the right hand side, you're going to see a little school called Leverage Chapel. And the whole school, the high school, everything's all on one campus. There's a big water tower, the LC Lines water tower maybe now. I don't know what's on it now. I don't get up there very often anymore. But right beside that school, there's a little old road called Sexton Road. The Sexton Road runs all the way to 259. I don't know if it's called Sexton all the way, but it's just a little unassuming, curvy little oil road. And if you go about a mile down that oil road, on the left-hand side of the road, you'll see a clearing, and you'll see a big old metal shop. And that big old metal shop is all that's left of the wrecking yard. But I know that shop was still there last time I drove by. That was my papa's shop. My dad and my papa and my uncle and granny, all of them worked on that shop, helped build that shop. That shop's still standing there. And then when you get to the bottom of that hill, there's a little dirt road. And that little dirt road, I think it may be old road now or paved now. But that little dirt road went down, and that's where my grandmother's house was. And my Uncle Bobby used to live on the right-hand side of that road in a little trailer house. But right where that clearing is, where you see that shop, that's where the property facing that road, Sexton Road right there, is where our house was. That was a piece of land that my papa gave my dad so that my mom and dad could get them a little Jim Walters home. I don't know if Jim Walters is still around. They were cheap little homes, and you didn't have to have good credit. They would take your land, you know, it was like a consignment type deal. They would take your land in lieu of a down payment and put on the house. And so they had it was a little 3-bedroom Jim Walters home. And we lived there from the time I was about, I'd say probably about 4 or 5 to the time I was about 9 or 10. That little house ended up burning down. Actually, Granny burned it down. Ain't that funny? I told you she's crazy. At the time, I didn't know she was crazy. At the time, I thought she was everything in the world when I was 5 years old. I loved spending time with her back then. We'd listen to records, and she wasn't Pentecostal, so she had TV and movies, and she would go rent movies. My granny had figured out how to put VCRs back together and get them working. So she'd go around the garage sales, and she'd buy old junk VCRs that weren't working, and she'd take them apart, clean them up, get them working again. She always had her about 2 or 3 VCRs. And then she'd go, my papa was gone all the time working. She'd go down to the video rental store and just rent 10 movies at a time and bring them home and record them, you know. pirating, I guess is what they call it now. Back then they called it good sense. And she had a video collection like you wouldn't believe on one wall in her home. You know, just every movie you can think, every Western, every Clint Eastwood movie. I've seen them all, you know. And so I enjoyed spending time at her house. And, you know, I'd play in the wrecking yard. And even when I was 5 and 6, you know, I'd go out there and hang out, walk around with my dog. I had a little wiener dog named Sammy. And Sammy's a pretty good old mutt, man. He's a little miniature dachshund. He's a nut. He's bad about digging under fences, whatnot, as dachshunds do. Had to stand up to my first bully because of that dog, because he dug around the fence, got loose, and my bully confronted me, and I had to. Well, that's a story for another car, but yeah, I had that little dog for a long time. He's a good little mutt. One of the few dogs I've ever connected with in my life. I've had some dogs, but really only 1 or 2 of them have I really ever been just super worked up about. The other one, we had a little dog named Tina, a little Jack Russell, for a long time, me and Rach. Anyways, so I'm about 5 or 6, and my mom was so fun when I was a kid, and we just had the best time together. She made things fun for me. She knew I was you know, it just didn't matter what it was. She made things fun for me, even just riding in a car. And now back then, you know, my parents didn't have no money, and you know, the Jim Walters home was a godsend, but they didn't have a bunch of money, you know. And one of the things, just about nobody in my family had no money, honestly. And one of the things just about everybody in my family did in that little town was work for a place called the Kilgore News Herald. The Kilgore News Herald, just a little town newspaper. And it didn't pay much, but just about everybody in my family at one point had a paper route for the Kilgore News Herald, and that's how they made extra scratch and paid the bills. And my mom was no exception. My mom ran a paper route for the Kilgore News Herald, and her and my dad depended on that money in order to make the bills every month. He had just got bumped into, I don't think he was in quality control yet. I think he was still in R&D doing drafting stuff, but he wasn't making a lot of money, you know, a little small town wage or whatever. And they had bad credit and, you know, all the things young new couples have. They had all that. So my mom had to run this paper route every day for the Kilgore News Herald. And my mom's paper route ran all out through Overton and whatnot and a bunch of little rural areas. And she'd run it in that little red Volkswagen Bug. Now, you know, when you're a kid, the last thing in the world you want to go do is go sitting in a hot, sweaty car all day and drive around and get to do nothing. You know, there weren't no screens or iPads or even Walkmans back then, you know. I mean, I guess there were, but we ain't had none. And most times I would beg my mom to let me stay with Granny. If I stayed with Granny, I got to watch cartoons and get snacks, and we would listen to albums together. And sometimes she would let me play with the tools, and I'd make things in the backyard. And it was just a grand time. It's a good place to be a 6-year-old, you know what I mean? And things are also a little stressful at that time. I do remember this. I wasn't super excited about having a younger sibling, especially when I found out I was going to be a girl. And of course, when Kimberly came along, she was a baby, and everybody was all excited about the baby. And, you know, sometimes older kids don't appreciate that. And I think it was a bit of struggle for me because I had been the only kid for so long at that point. I had everybody's undivided attention. Ooh, that's a heavy one right there, carrying a big load. Sorry. For y'all listening at home, that's a train going by. I live real close to a train track. My mom loved music. My mom loved music. everything from 50s, 60s doo-wop. She loved Michael Jackson. She loved Cher. She loved. My mom turned me on to Jimmy Buffett. Right? My mom loved music, and she could always find something she could groove to. My mom also loved to sing music, and the only problem with that is my mom couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. She had tubes. I am making a little bit of fun because it was hilarious. She had tubes in her ears when she was a kid, and she's pretty hearing impaired. And but that didn't slow her down. That did not slow Mama down, boy. She was gonna sing, brother. And I still have so many fond memories of her. Two of her favorite albums at the time was it was one of the Carpenters album, maybe the first Carpenters album, and also Carole King had an album called Tapestry, which is an amazing album. And boy, my mom would listen to Carole King and dance me around the living room and wail at the top of her lungs. And you know what? It was all fine by me because at that time I didn't know no better, and I liked the way she sang. She sang loud. Ooh, that did not work out the way I wanted it to. That's all right. We're gonna wait till it hardens a little bit. I mostly just want a coat in there. There you go, baby. Yeah, I still love Carole King to this day because of my mom. And boy, if we was in the car and the car had a radio, all the cars didn't have radios back then, but boy, if we was in a car had a radio, we was blowing and going. I can't remember if that little VW had a radio or not. I'm thinking maybe it didn't, but I could be wrong about that. And I told you, Mama grew up in a wrecking yard. She'd drive. You could hand my mama keys to a backhoe, and she'd figure out how to make that thing go to town. All right, well, wasn't nothing gonna get in her way when she was ready to get up and go somewhere. I love the way Beetles sound and Super Beetles sound. There's something about the not Beetles, but more Super Beetles. There's something about a 1600cc dual port when it's got the stock factory exhaust on it, little whistlers. I love that little, whatever it is. I like that little almost Jetson sound those little cars make. I've always had a fascination with little cars. Papa had some really cool cars in the wrecking yard that I played in, because those cars were like my fort. That's where I went out there and hung out, And he had this one little car. It was a German-built car, and it was called a Go-Go Mobile. And I've looked it up before. I should have looked it up before I started talking about it, but it was just crazy little air-cooled Germany was making some crazy little cars because nobody could afford a car over there because everybody was so broke at the time. I've always had a fascination especially for air-cooled stuff. Some of the later Volkswagens are pretty cool too. I don't hate a Jetta. I've cratered a Jetta transmission before, but luckily it wasn't mine, so it didn't matter that much. Anyways. I was talking about Mama singing, and I was remember this time, like it was very screechy. She couldn't hear herself. I remember my best buddy at the time in school at one time was a dude named Wade Paulus, Clifford Paulus, man. Oh, Wade was cool. He went off to the military, and I think he's done some pretty cool things with his life from what I've heard. Anyways, I hadn't seen him in years. Next time I get out to Waco, I need to look him up. But he's a good dude, man. And a real unassuming kid, real nice kid, always growing up, very polite, had really good manners. My parents just loved him. He spent so much time over at our house with my dad helping him with his truck that he bought from the high school shop teacher that he's the one that my dad taught us to rebuild quadrajets together because he was so mad that the shop teacher had done such a crappy job teaching the kids how to rebuild a quadrajet. And so we rebuilt the quadrajet on his Blazer. But Wade spent so much time at our house, the running joke was he was like Dennis the Menace, because he just always showed up knocking on the garage door. That's the kind of family I got. We're back door. You know what I mean? Like you come over to my house, you come around to the back of the house and knock on the back door, and you know, it's the kind of folks we are. We don't use the front door. That's a little. It is a little bougie. Front doors just look nice. You don't use them. Oh, Wade would spend the night one night, and 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning, me and Wade had been out hanging out late at night, racing, hot rodding around, and 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, my mom decides is the opportune time to get up and start making breakfast and wail Alan Jackson's Way Down Yonder on the Chattahoochee at the top of her lungs. And it was going on about 8 or 9 minutes, and I just heard my buddy Wade sitting bolt upright on his little pallet on the floor or whatever, and it just, what the hell is wrong with your mom? He'd never heard her sing yet. It didn't matter. She was having fun. And that's what I've learned about life. Don't matter if you can do something or not. Just do it, you know? You know who does stuff? People that do things. It always cracks me up. You know, you do anything on the internet, you get a lot of people showing up to tell you suck or whatever. And, you know, God, I'm no exception, especially butthurt guys about their material items they obsess about. Like, I'm sorry, if your truck's your whole personality, bro, you need to find something else to latch on to. Your personality shouldn't be a material object. But some of those guys that show up sometimes, it always makes me laugh. I'm like, oh, you ain't this, you ain't this. Yeah, but I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm the one putting myself out here every week. I'm doing this thing. I'm doing all the things I'm doing. So until you're doing something, your opinion don't really matter to me, because you know somebody's doing it. I hang out with a bunch of people that are doing stuff. I like to surround myself always. When I was in business, when I was in contracting trades, I surrounded myself with people that were doing things, people that were more successful than me, because I wanted to learn from them. And I'm the same way with comedy. I hang out with a bunch of dudes. Not all of them are more successful, but a great deal of them are, and most of them I've learned something from. And I like to surround myself with people I can learn stuff from. So it always makes me laugh. The bottom line is, she was having fun. And boy, she sang her ass off. And my wife laughs at me because I can't carry a tune in a bucket either. And I actually have hearing damage. And I like to wail at the top of my lungs when I got my headphones on in the morning and walk around the house doing stuff. And I'm sure one day my kids will have a podcast talking about, or whatever we got then. Making fun of Dad for trying to sing Red Clay Strays at 8 o'clock in the morning while he's doing yoga. There's a picture for you. I don't wear no leotard or nothing. But, yeah. Daggone. Get off in there. Alright, got a good coat on that. Let's let that dry. This axe started out as a whole project, and it's a very special little tool to me, because it came from my wife's great uncle, and I love using it. But it's in really bad shape. I don't want to replace the handle. I wanted to do something interesting. There's this Japanese art where they like take a broken bowl and they weld it together with gold or something like that. And I read about it one time. It just seemed really cool to me. So I'm kind of taking that approach here, but with some resin and stuff. So it'll be interesting. I can't wait to show it off to you guys when I get done with it. Gotta have some notes today, because one of my favorite things about Volkswagen is, I think without a doubt, it is one of the vehicles that has inspired more creativity in people than just about any other vehicle. I have seen more iterations of things built out of Volkswagen Bugs, or Volkswagen Bug drivetrains, or Volkswagen buses than just about any other vehicle. Like, I mean, you really think about all the crazy stuff, crazy contraptions you've seen on Marketplace, and some of them aren't great, some of them are incredible, you know. But Volkswagen was kind of crazy too, because of their history, because of, and we're going to get into that. But they made so much wild stuff. Volkswagen was just like, oh, has anybody made a car that floats in the water? Yeah, oh, Schwimmwagen, you know, and here we go. Actually, they made that for the military, so it had a more sinister purpose. But if somebody tells you they know every make and model of Volkswagen there is, they're lying, because there's just no way you can know. Every time I think I know, some weird one pops up in some corner of the world that I've never heard of before. And so maybe there's like two guys out there that know it all. Maybe it's like Fluffy and Jay Leno know all the Volkswagen bugs, but I doubt it. Know all the Volkswagen creations, but I doubt it. The bus, or the combi, you know, whatever you call it, what part of the world you're in, or some people call it a Samba van, but the bus was actually invented and drawn up by a Dutchman. I can't remember his name, but they made a really cool video when they stopped producing the bus in Brazil finally, and they went out and found his son, and his son was around when he designed this thing when he was younger, and they gave somebody the original drawings for the bus, and the guy just sketched them out on a napkin anyways. But that little bus has been present and in use on every continent in more numbers than any other vehicle. That bus has been to Antarctica. I mean, that bus has been everywhere, you know. There's literally, you'd be hard pressed to find people in the world that don't recognize that shape. And the Beetle is no exception, you know. It's, you know, but before there was Hilux, there was Combi Bus. You know what I mean? Like, you can go all over. I've traveled to Africa, and I've been some places, Middle East and stuff, and you see Toyota Hilux pickups everywhere now, little Mitsubishi pickups. But there was a time where you went to all these places, and you know, terrorists back in the day, before they had the privilege of having a Toyota Hilux, they had to do their work out of a Volkswagen bus. Is it the Palestinians in Back to the Future? Aren't they driving a Volkswagen bus when they come up to take out Doc Brown? Am I remember that right? I can't remember. Somebody will show up in the comment and tell me, and I'll laugh about it next week. There's always one guy, you start talking about Volkswagens, that shows up, and it's been no exception anytime I've brought it up on the internet. But there's always one guy that's like, I don't mess with no Nazi cars, you know. But that's because of a misunderstanding of history. The Volkswagen, as we know it, has very little to do with the Nazi Party. You know, the company was formed under the Nazi Party. Of course, it was formed by Adolf Hitler. He brought in Ferdinand Porsche and all that stuff to make a cheap car for the German people. But it never, that was like in 37, 38. And when was the war start? 39, maybe? I'm not great at history sometimes, but they never even really, I think they made like 8 cars, you know, to show off, and then really didn't do much past that. And the war began, and they were turned into a war machine. And that's all they did, was produce things for the war during World War at that time. You know, like, and it wasn't even Volkswagen bugs. There was these things, I think they're called Kugelwagons, Kugel something. It means bucket car, bucket utility thing, and they were just little plain Jane, little transport vehicles, and they made the Schwimmwagens, you know. But they didn't do much outside of that. That's all they were doing, and they had forced labor, so, you know, they were using slaves, and they were doing some bad stuff. I mean, it's no secret that it was not a great time for humanity. But what happened is, during the war, we, of course, went in there and blew the crap out of everything in Germany. And one of the things that, you know, America used to do war kind of like you used to get in a fight in your hometown. You know, he's growing up, like, especially older guys, and you mouth off a little bit to the wrong dude, and he'd lay you out, and then he'd pick you up, and y'all have a beer together, and, you know, he may buy you a beer, be like, yeah, don't ever do that again. Well, that's how the United States used to do war. The United States used to come in there and blow all your crap up, and the Allies were no exception. They come in there and blow all your crap up when you got to acting up, and then they'd show up afterwards and be like, well, we're gonna help you build some schools and help you get these factories running so people got jobs and stuff, but you better act right this time. You know, it was that used to be kind of the way things were done. And World War II is no exception. We went in there and blew the crap out of everything. There's all kind of damage to the country, to the infrastructure and such. And one of the plants they took over was the plant that ended up becoming the Wolfsburg plant. It wasn't called that at the time, and I can't remember the name right off the top of my head. But they took over this plant, and at first, because it was in the British zone, the British had it. The British were allowed control of it. The British allies were allowed control of it. And there's one guy, I got his name here. I was trying to remember. Major Hurst. Okay. Yeah, so it's like April 45, and Major Hurst takes over the Wolfsburg plant. They've, of course, freed all the hostages and slaves and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Now it's just Germans that need a job working in this plant. And they could have shut the plant down according to the rules at that time, but they didn't. He wanted to see if there was a way. He found a Volkswagen, one of those little, one of the concept cars, and he really liked it. And he said, man, I think this is actually a pretty great vehicle for British troops to use to move around the country and do stuff we need to do. And so the British military, of course, they were like, okay, go ahead, you know, get this plane up. Well, Major Hurst had an engineering background. Now, there's a lot of problems. This factory was in real bad shape. They had to do all kind of work, get the factory back up and running. And they used to not be able to produce when it was raining because there were holes in the roof and the windows was blowed out. And they didn't even have anybody to build carburetors for them because the carburetor producers, the guys that were originally making the carburetors for VW, were in the Soviet zone, and so that was lost to the Allies. And so Major Hurst even set up a carburetor manufacturing spot inside the plant, and helped set these guys up to manufacture carburetors for this little car. And they went ahead with Ferdinand Porsche's original idea, so we're going to make this little car, and they started making these little cars. So Volkswagen as you know it, Volkswagen as you've ever seen in your life, for the most part, unless you've been to a museum, it was British control at the time. You know, it never benefited the Nazis one bit. It never benefited the cars you know today. Never benefited Hitler. He didn't get a dime of that. You know. So in fact, I read somewhere that VW actually opened up a restitution fund for families whose ancestry went back to the people that were used as slaves in that plant and stuff, which, you know, some of that stuff is a little tongue-in-cheek. You have to wonder how serious companies are when they do stuff like that, or if it's just a PR move, who knows. I can't tell you any more about them than that. But it was kind of funny. So the British tried to give Volkswagen away to everybody, free of charge. Free of charge. The British tried to give Volkswagen to everybody. They wanted the Volkswagen plant reopened, but it had these specific rules. It could only produce like 10% profit and stuff like that. Is, you know, after wartime rules. But they tried to give VW to everybody. There was a car company out of Australia that came and looked at the VW plant and passed on it. Of course, all the British companies were like, nah, that car's junk. Nobody's ever going to buy that thing. That's the most ridiculous piece of crap I've ever seen. Nobody's going to buy that. Nobody's ever going to want that car. And finally, they run out of people to offer it to, and they called up Edsel Ford's son, Henry Ford III, was running Ford Automotive at that time. They called Mr. Ford over. They said, Mr. Ford, come over here. And it's always funny with those guys that don't like Nazi cars or whatever are Ford owners, because Henry Ford was big Nazi sympathizer. You know, it's well documented. That always makes me laugh. But they call Henry Ford III up. They said, we want you to come over and see this plant, and we'll give it to you, Ford. We'll give you Volkswagen, this company, free of charge. Spoil of war, we'll just give you his company, and you come run this plant. And Henry Ford came over there and toured the plant and said, no, this is dumb. There's no value here. This car is never going to be anything. Nah. Right? So he passes on it. So Major Hurst ends up still running the country. At some point, he turns it over to, I can't remember this guy's name, but he's important too. Sorry, I got to find it. Heinz Nordhoff. I kept thinking one say Wilhelm Nordhoff. He gave it to Heinz Nordhoff, and Heinz Nordhoff just ran that company with an iron grip on the bank. He didn't like to spend no money. In fact, when Volkswagen started designing the Super Beetle, Volkswagen spent, this is funny too, Volkswagen spent more money and time redesigning the Beetle into the Super Beetle than they ever did on any of their other cars up to that point, like all of them combined. If Heinz Nordhoff was still alive in the late 60s, I don't think the Super Beetle would have happened. I don't think he would have spent that money. But the reason the Super Beetle happened is kind of funny. So when the Beetle does show up in the United States and start getting imported, it sells really well. They're killing it, bro. Everybody's buying these little Beetles. They love them. They're inexpensive. They're fairly reliable. They're good little cars. They were way ahead of their time. And, you know, most people concede that now. These little cars were great. You know, they had some flaws here and there, but they were even pretty good in ice and snow. They were good for all kind of different climates. And they sold like gangbusters in the United States. And oh, it's Car and Driver. I couldn't remember the name. I think it's Car and Driver. So Car and Driver magazine. So what happens is the Beetle gets real popular, and the American companies go, well, man, we got to make something like this. We got to make some little car people like, you know? That's a good idea. That's back when American car companies thought about what people wanted and tried to build that instead of what they could sneak in past cafe regulations and make look like a hideous egg. Anyways, it was a different time. But Car and Driver, so what happened is these things got popular. Well, then Japan got in on the game too. Japan started sending us some cars. Like, hey man, we want to compete in this market. And Toyota showed up on the scene. Toyota was doing gangbusters, right? Toyota showed up and changed the game. Datsun showed up and changed the game. You know what I mean? Little Datsun 510 sedans were good little cars, man. They make great rally cars. And what happened is Car and Driver pitted a Volkswagen Beetle, a regular Beetle, standard Beetle, I think a 1500cc engine. They pitted that against a Toyota Corolla. And the Toyota Corolla handed that Beetle its ass in every category. Reliability, comfort, storage, performance, just kicked the crap out of the Volkswagen Beetle and did it at a much lower price. And Volkswagen went, ooh, we're going to stay in the game. We got to change up our car a little bit. And they did. Super Beetle and the Beetle have, you know, outside of the shape and the drivetrain, there's a lot of differences, you know. First of all, they made it bigger, you know. They stretched it out in every conceivable direction. It's wider, it's a little taller, it's a little longer. They moved a bunch of stuff around in the trunk, of course, in the front of the car, and got all kind of extra storage space out there, like tripled or 80% gain to storage space because the way they moved the windshield washer fluid pump and stuff like that. And then they of course, in the United States cars down in Britain, they had a 1300cc and a 1600cc dual port engine. But in the United States, they only came with 1600cc dual port engine with the big engine. And the 1600cc had some design improvements too. Volkswagen's real bad about cooking number 3 cylinder, you know, before that. And so they put a better oil cooler added on to the Super Beetle that helped keep that 3rd cylinder cool, you know, and keep the temperature right on it. Well, I don't remember everything they did, but they truly improved the car at all. They put a McPherson strut front end, which was a very popular move at the time. But that was one of the complaints people had. And the old torsion bar system on the Volkswagen was real heavy. It's heavier than the McPherson front end. And so they put, no, that's not true. I got something screwed up there. But I think the McPherson's heavier. But they put this McPherson strut front end on it, and, you know, just about everything's had McPherson struts on it at some point now. but they wanted it to drive more like a Ford and less like a Volkswagen. And then they did a crazy, those double jointed swing axles and stuff in the back. And that was to get rid of the, that was a big Ralph Nader thing, was the old swing axle Volkswagens. If in a curve, they'd jack up and flip over, which is highly exaggerated, as I have driven lots of Volkswagens and never once, and I've driven some the older ones with that swing axle, and I've never had that happen to me. Maybe I just didn't drive it hard enough. I don't know what these people were doing in the 60s. But they did a lot to improve this little car. It had better vents and better airflow on the engine, to deal with American traffic, so it could sit in traffic, not cook that little engine. And had, of course, like in '74, they had like a padded dash, and the steering wheels had a plastic steering wheel. The windshield was completely different. You had much more viewing room in a '72 Super Beetle than you did in a regular Beetle. And this little one my mom had, it was in pretty good shape. The paint was faded and red. We're not paint job people. We never were. I don't know anything about body work. I mean, I know the basics, but I couldn't do it to save my life. I turn wrenches, work on engines, transmissions, rear ends. I can do some stuff. But if you got a dent in your fender, do not call me, because chances are I'm going to make it look worse before I'm done with it. I got a dent in the Mazda right now I'm trying to figure out how to fix, for a piece of concrete come flying at me on the freeway the other day. And I think I'm going to pay somebody to do it. So, and my dad didn't do a lot of paint and body work. It just wasn't his thing. His thing was reliable, mechanic, and getting all those things fixed. And that little Beetle, boy, that little Super Beetle was good. Good little car. My mom drove the piss out of it. She can give that thing any slack. And I have many good memories just riding around with her in the car. One of my favorite memories. Over in Overton, there used to be a Dairy Queen. I don't know if it's still there, but there was a Dairy Queen by the railroad track. And my mom stopped at that Dairy Queen one day when we was running the paper out, and they didn't have a lot of money, and so we didn't go out to eat and stuff like that, and it was pretty rare. But my mom pulled in Dairy Queen, and we sat outside at the Dairy Queen, and they had music playing through the speakers, and we had a hot fudge sundae together. And we had big plans. We were going home, and I had a new G.I. Joe character Papa had given me, and so I was going to go home and play with my G.I. Joes. It was just a good day when you're 5 and 6. You got your plans made. You can go home, play little G.I. Joes. Summertime, I think. And we sat out there, and there was a singer back in the day named Donovan. And Donovan had this song called Catch the Wind. And anytime I hear any part of that song, I remember sitting at that Dairy Queen with my mama, eating that hot fudge sundae, and just gabbing, just having a good day. And I remember the way my mom was beautiful when she was younger, and I remember the way her hair was kind of blowing in the wind, and I always like to think of her that way, that day. And then there was a lot of times I would go ride with her while she ran the paper routes. Maybe Granny had errands or whatever. Sometimes my mom just didn't want to leave me at Granny's house. Sometimes she just wanted me to be with her, which, who knows why moms do the things they do. I've never been one. But sometimes moms just like to be around their babies, It's a little different, right? I like being around my babies, but, it's different when you're dad. And sometimes we would go see my dad at work at the WKM plant, and that was always fun because, sometimes I'd get a candy bar out of the vending machine. We had a Coke machine at the church, but we didn't have no candy bar machine. So I always like to see that candy bar machine when we went into the WKM plant. And I like seeing my dad at work because he was a different side of him. I saw Dad the mechanic and Dad the dad. But my dad at work was a force of nature. He took everything he did very seriously, and I always like to see him in that environment. It's the environment I know him best as now, because he worked hard my entire life. He worked well past retirement age. I was so surprised when he actually retired. I couldn't believe that happened, because I just honestly thought he was just going to work till the end of time, till he got done doing stuff. One day my mom goes out, it's not too long after Kimberly's born. Kimberly's a newborn, an infant. I'll tell you a story. It's not a great story, but it's what happened. It's a part of the history. My mom goes out, run that paper out one day, and it's raining and pouring down cats and dogs. And the roads in Overton aren't great at that time. And I can't remember exactly where the accident happened. But apparently she was going around a curve and lost control of the car, and the Volkswagen hit the curb on the edge of the road. And when it hit the curb, it flipped up on its side and went down a hill and landed in a creek upside down and landed on its roof. Now this is before, cell phones and all that kind of crap, and nobody knew. The only way we knew is when she didn't come back home. So she had already been upside down in this creek for a while. Like, it was a bad wreck, and for whatever reason, nobody saw it. I don't know if it's just a super stormy day and a Volkswagen disappearing off the side of the road real quick. You couldn't see anything. It was just a hill straight down into a creek, So, Dad, of course, gets worried for her. Takes me and leaves me and my sister over at my grandmother's, and him and Papa and everybody, this is the way the men used to do. They would, like the cavalry, we got to go find our person. And so this is no different than when they did it on horseback, except now they're in a Dodge Charger and pickup trucks, and they're scouring everywhere on this paper out looking for my mom. And it's my Uncle Paul that found her. And my Uncle Paul, is like, he's my Aunt Linda's husband. And my Uncle Paul is like John Wayne. Like, if John Wayne was just a dude living in Kilgore in the 80s working as a lineman, that's who my Uncle Paul was. He's one of the toughest human beings I ever known in my life. And I don't think my dad's family always treated him good because he was an outsider. And I heard bad stuff they did. Not necessarily them, but like people at the church didn't always treat him good because he wasn't super religious at the time or whatever. I remember hearing a story about, he basically donated his time, did all the electrical work for the church when they were remodeling the church. He did all the electrical work on it. But then still, the preacher's wife was giving him guff for missing church, like saying rude things about him because he missed church on Sunday. The Pentecostals were something else, man. I'm sure most little small town churches have these problems. Regardless of the denomination. But basically, she was giving him crap for not coming to church on Sunday because he's out working overtime trying to provide for his family. And but my dad and him, I always thought my dad and him got along, and my dad never spoke rude about him or anything. But I know some of my dad's brothers sometimes were not especially nice or whatever. They could be a little rough. But my Uncle Paul was like living, breathing John Wayne, just a big old man. He had 1 foot shorter than the other from a car accident when he was younger. And he lost some length on his leg, and he always wore cowboy boots as long as I knew him. And he was a cowboy, bro. He's real honest goodness cowboy. Horses, roping, he could do it all, son. But one of them cowboy boots had a sole on it about that thick, to keep his legs the right height. And he was a lineman. I'd heard stories about him my whole life. He showed up for me. My Uncle Paul has showed up for me in some of the most unique and surprising times of my life. And he's just showed up and been there for me. And he's just a great big old man. And honestly, I remember one day, I was in my 20s at this point, and I had this old 77 Chevrolet Suburban, and this truck was just a nightmare. I had more problems with this vehicle than half the vehicles I ever owned. And it was just giving me fits. And I got to the top of the hill, and it died on me. And I got out of this truck, and when I tell you I beat the piss out of this truck, I beat the piss out of this truck. I punched and kicked, I broke a window, I hollered and yelled and just got out of my system and whooped the fire out of this Chevrolet Suburban. And it was just like magic. I was kind of sitting there trying to get my breath together. Here rolls Uncle Paul in his big old pickup. Hey, you okay, baby boy? You need a ride home? Well, here, let's hook that thing up, see if we can't get it started. It was a standard transmission, so he helped me pull start it, you know. He just showed up for me at wild times. After my mom passed, I hadn't seen him and my Aunt Linda in a very, very long time because of some mistakes I made that injured our relationship. Well, I was just a craphead, basically. And he was, when I got out of my truck at the graveyard, and I was just a mess, and he was right there. He was they were in the procession right behind me, and he got out and he walked up and grabbed me and hugged me, and it was the best hug, because Uncle Paul made you feel good about things. He was, like I said, he's real life John Wayne, you know. I heard he got his leg amputated, but still out there riding Harley Davidsons and stuff, you know what I mean? Like, yo, you just can't keep a dude like that down. And I got some more stories about him that'll come on later when we start talking about my 72 Ford F100. Because he plays a big part in that story. My Uncle Paul was cool, man. And my Uncle Paul, what he did is he got on the CB radio and hollered out to all his lineman buddies. And then the cavalry really showed up to go look for Mom, see if they could find Mom, what happened to Mom. And I believe my Uncle Paul's the one that found her. I believe he's the one that found her car. And of course, they got down there and they got rescue efforts and everything. And, you know, of course, got ambulance out there to get her out of the car. She had, her skull was fractured in several places. She had brain swelling, brain damage. It was bad. It was a bad wreck. And she laid upside down in that car for a couple hours in that creek. And so it's just, you know, her brain swole. It was bad. It's not a good situation, right? And she's going to be in the hospital for a while, for months, you know, and school's getting ready to start. And everything's changing. I'm getting ready to start school. Maybe. I think maybe this is my kindergarten year. I really can't remember, to be honest with you. I should have looked it up. But school's getting ready to start for me at Lovers Chapel Elementary. And I don't know how they came about the decision. I'm sure my Aunt Linda and my Uncle Paul just offered. But it was decided that I would go stay with them, which was fine by me at the time, because when I was growing up, my Aunt Linda was one of my most favorite people in the world. My dad's sister she's his older sister. I used to call her Aunt Dinda when I was a kid. And my Aunt Linda was just one of the sweetest. She loved animals, and they always had horses and dogs, and she's one of the best artists. She could paint and draw anything. And it makes me sad because she got older, she got arthritis, and she can't do a lot of that stuff anymore. But beautiful. She would paint and make beautiful things and ceramics, and I have a big old stuffed dog that's in there on my youngest boy's bed, and Aunt Linda made me that dog when I was a kid, and he still uses a blanket that Aunt Linda made me when I was a kid. She was that aunt. I always had the best time with my Aunt Linda. We would just draw together. We always had good times. We'd go riding around in her pickup truck. They always had pickup trucks because they did ranch stuff. They had a little piece of property, and they had horses and stuff. They only have one kid. They had a son named Paul Jr. And Paul Jr., so in my family, I was Little Jerry, my dad was Big Jerry, and of course there was Big Paul and Little Paul. And that's how we were all called, you know. I still got family members smaller than me that call me Little Jerry, which is the funniest thing in the world. Little Paul's older than me about 6, 7 years, maybe 5. I can't remember. Little Paul, I wanted to be him when I was a kid. I thought he was the coolest dude on the planet. First of all, not only did he have the whole Millennium Falcon and all the little Star Wars characters, but he had a ZZ Top poster in his bedroom, and he turned me on to ZZ Top. And he had a Dukes of Hazzard poster in his bedroom, and he just had the coolest room, and he was just cool. He was fun. He was always doing something interesting, man. We would go out in the woods and have a good time, and then when 3-wheelers and 4-wheelers come around, he had stuff like that. And Paul Jr. is an amazing mechanic. Amazing mechanic. He was a race car driver. He had a stock car, and I helped out with the pit crew, and I think he was a graphics designer. He's a really good artist too. I think he's taught scuba lessons, and who knows what all he's done by now. I ruined my relationship with him, and it's one of the big regrets of my life. Just being a piece of crap, saying things that were untrue because I was mad at him, and I ruined my relationship with him. And I think about him often. He was just the coolest guy when I was growing up, and I really think the world of him. I think he's a pretty good man, from what I hear. So, yeah, I hate that I ruined my relationship with him, but back then, boy, I followed him around like I was a shadow. You know, I just thought he was the coolest guy ever. I remember when I first started going to school, and he went to the high school right there on the same campus, and every time I would see him in between, like, going to a different class or recess or whatever, and he'd say hi to me, I felt cool as hell because the cool kid, you know. He was just a good dude, man. I loved him. I still do. I just, like I said, I messed up the relationship and reached out a couple times and no reply, and so not everybody's into fixing stuff, and I get it. And I was a pretty big shithead at the time, so you know, he don't owe me no forgiveness, but I sure thought the world of him growing up. And so I was okay going to live with Uncle Paul and Aunt Linda because, you know, it was a fun place to be. I liked being around Uncle Paul. He had a big old booming voice. Linda Kay, boy, he was tough, you know. And my Aunt Linda was just so great, man. And she made bologna sandwiches exactly the way I liked them. And she'd cut them up in little triangles for me. And she always had, you know, the stuff I liked in her refrigerator. And she really doted on me a lot, you know. And her and my mother were very, very close. The best of friends, very close. And my Aunt Linda was kind of like you know, she's kind of like a second mom to me, you know. And I need to go see her. I hadn't seen her in many years, since probably the last funeral or something, probably Uncle Larry's funeral, Aunt Barbara's funeral. Last time I seen her, back 2017. So I need to go see her. She's getting older. I've tried to catch her a couple times. I've been in town. She's had so many health problems and stuff. It's been hard to get hooked up with her. She's had so many surgeries and all kind of stuff. She was the one that was driving when they got hit by the bread truck driver that killed my meemaw, that I was telling y'all about, I think in the El Camino story or whatever. So she had massive injuries from that wreck that took many years away from her trying to recover from. But I love my Aunt Linda. My Aunt Linda, she's tough, man. She'd mess with a horse. Uncle Paul was tough, man. That fool would I saw him break a horse one time just looking at it. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't take no guff. He was the real dude. Tough old man. But they were good people, and she took her little brother's kid in and raised him for a year while my mom was recovering. I remember after my mom got out of the hospital, she got real upset because I kept wanting to go to Aunt Linda's house. And it wasn't anything about my mom. It's just I'd had this year of living at their house, and I loved being around my Aunt Linda. But that wreck messed my mom up. It messed her up pretty bad. She had permanent brain damage. She lost a lot of her motor functions, and she had to get back. She went through a lot of rehab. She would, for years after that, she used to play tennis and do all kind of fun stuff. She was real active, like doing stuff outdoors. Her and my dad camped we went camping all the time when I was a kid. Go fishing. She'd go play in the lake, and she couldn't do a lot of that after the accident. And that wears on you. Anybody that's had chronic pain or damage from an accident or anything like that, I was talking about that with my back. It wears on you. You can't have as much fun as you'd like to have sometimes. So she was different, after the wreck. Plus, she would get these migraines, and this is back in the 80s. They didn't know what to do. Every time back in the 80s, if a woman went to a doctor and told him something was wrong with her, he would prescribe her a tampon and a Midol, because they just didn't really understand, how different women are than us and how different their health needs are at that point. But yeah, it did some damage to her. So she had these migraines. They didn't know what to do about it. She had some of the brain damage and stuff. Still loved music. Still couldn't sing for shit. And I say it slowed her down. Hey, let me tell you something about Sherry Kay. There ain't a force of nature. It took death to stop her. You understand me? Like, my mom's a force. I had one of those moms. I had one of those put boots on and go to battle for you moms. My mom took on the whole A-Leaf Independent School District one time when they screwed me around. Like, she put on boots and went to war. Now, don't get me wrong. She put on boots, go to war for you, come home and tell you what an idiot you were afterwards. But she put on them boots and she'd go do the work. You know what I mean? She's tough. She can grow up 4 other kids in a wrecking yard. You get a little grit. You know what I mean? My dad drug that little red Volkswagen home. They had to bring home. One of the sickest things about that night, I'm going to talk about this, and this ain't pretty, but the Kilgore News Herald, those rat bastard pieces of, I always remember this. Like, my dad, I try to think about what my dad was going through this time. So he's got a newborn, and he's got a 5-year-old. Little boy's just going to school. He works all the time. He works long hours all the time. Plus, he works on cars on the weekend to make extra money. But that night that my mom got in that wreck, basically the Kilgore News Herald told my dad they was going to fire her and they weren't going to pay for the papers she delivered unless somebody got out there and delivered the rest of them papers. He had to go roll up a whole bunch more newspapers and collect the ones he could, because back then you kind of had to buy the papers and then you collected from your customers to get paid. So he had to go roll up a bunch of newspapers. His wife's laying in the hospital. Don't know if she's living or dying, brain damage. But he's got to go roll up these newspapers and deliver the rest of her route. For these greedy psychopaths. He's a tougher man than I know sometimes when I really go back and mind some of this stuff and think about some of the trials he went through in this time period. And he did it. He did it. He just did it. He was just one of those guys that just, when things need to be done, he went and did the thing. Isn't that crazy? Can you imagine a company treating somebody like that now? Doesn't even know if she's going to be alive. Doesn't know if she's going to live through the wreck. But he has to go deliver daggum papers. I don't know. It seems inhumane to me. I hope that place is closed by now. Seems like my whole family worked there. My Uncle Stanley had a paper route. My meemaw had a paper route. They all ran paper routes for them people, but I don't think it was a very good situation. I don't think they were very good people. I think they took advantage of people that didn't have a lot of income. That's what I think. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about that, but that is what I think. But if you know some greater humane story about the Kilgore News Herald that I don't, and I've been in that paper a bunch of times myself. They did an article on me when I went to Iraq to entertain the troops and stuff, but I ain't never read it because I know this story. And it turned out to be a moot point anyways, because she's in the hospital for months. But, when you got money, you got to make things happen. You got to do whatever you got to do to get that money. We've all been there. Maybe not that exact situation. But I always wonder what that did to him psychologically, because during this time period, I'm staying with Aunt Linda. My sister is at my grandmother. My grandmother's taking care of the baby, of the infant. Knowing what I know about her now, she shouldn't be trusted around a baby or any children. But his wife's in the hospital, brain cracked up. She's in bad shape. Don't know if she's going to be okay. She's been in intensive care for a long time. And he'd get off work and go to the hospital for visiting hours as long as he could be there. And I think some nights he slept up at the hospital. I'm sure he did. Why else? Why would you go home? But I know at least some of those nights he had to go home and wash clothes, and they didn't have money to eat out, so I'm sure he had to go home and cook food. And I know my aunts and uncles fed him and did stuff to help him out during that time period. I don't know the extent of it, but I know my Uncle Paul and my Aunt Linda did a lot to help him out in that time period. And I'm sure his other brothers did too, because they were, regardless of infighting and stuff like that in the family, they were always pretty good at taking care of one another when things got really bad. But I think about him getting off work and coming to Aunt Linda's house to see me after school and visit with me and check on me, and then going to Granny's house to check on Kimberly and spend time with this baby that he doesn't know very well that yet, And then going either up to that hospital to sleep and wait and see if my mom was going to be okay, or maybe some nights he just went back to that empty Jim Walters home and had to cook himself some food. I bet it was fried bologna. That was one of his favorite comfort foods. Either that, or he liked Vienna sausages split in half on a sandwich with some mayo. Or he used to take a bologna, and this is his favorite fishing food. We were going fishing. He'd take 2 pieces of bologna and cut them in a grid, and then we'd put them on saltine crackers and eat them. Those little pieces of bologna. That's still one of my favorite little treats today. I don't eat it too much because I can't handle processed meat anymore, thanks to the old Crohn's disease. But every once in a while I treat myself when I don't mind knowing I'm going to have to crap my brains out the next day. But I do wonder what that was like for him. It had to be nightmarishly difficult, and I'm certainly thankful that he made it through. And Mom eventually gets out of the hospital and comes home, and like I said, she had some damage, lasting effects, things to be expected. I think my dad took the engine out of that Super Beetle and put in his. He had a little white Super Beetle with the back end all cut out like a Baja. I love that thing. It's cool. He had a big old Stanger muffler on it. That thing sounded bad, boy. And then that little red Volkswagen. And so in the junkyard, when you went in the wrecking yard, you went past the shop, there was a ditch where they burned trash. Which is a weird thing to say in 2024, but we had a ditch where we just burned our trash. And then you get up a little hill, and on that hill there was an old boat, and there was a 1949 Studebaker pickup, and there was a 1974 bay window Volkswagen bus, blue Volkswagen bus, and there was that little red crushed up Volkswagen Super Beetle of my mother's. That car sat there so long that I can tell you this. When I was about 15 or 16, I got my first Volkswagen. I forgot to tell you all that when I was talking about that. I had a Volkswagen too at that time too. I had a 72 Super Beetle, but it was kind of like a Baja. My Uncle Larry actually gave it to me, and it was basically just a body. We had to build everything on it. But so when I had my little Super Beetle, I remember me and my dad went up to Kilgore one time. We robbed parts off that little old red Super Beetle. Was still sitting in the woods. But I remember there was times when I was, a little older, and I knew my mom just couldn't do some of the stuff she just couldn't, do. Sometimes I would get so mad at that car, I would walk by it in the woods, and I'd whop on it with a stick, just whoop the fire out of that old Volkswagen. And I'm sure I regretted that years later when I had my Super Beetle and I needed the parts off of it. Yeah, that little Volkswagen bus, that was my primary fort in the junkyard. I had some Shasta Colas in there, all the flavors, except lemon lime. Yeah, it was gross. But I had Shasta Cola in there, and I had my funny books, comic books. My papa called them my funny books. I had a stack of my funny books in there, and boy, I'd sit in that Volkswagen bus. You sit in that Volkswagen bus in the wrecking yard, and it sat up on this hill, and it had a tree wedged up against it that had kind of grown up under it. But you could look down the hill, and you could see all the way through the woods, especially in the wintertime. You could look all the way through them pine trees. You can see, they don't lose their needles. They do get a little sparse. And you could look through there, you can see my granny's house, and you can see the shop, and you can see the wrecking yard and all the cars. It was a good place to be a kid. It's a good place to hang out, read funny books, find out what old Archie and Jughead's up to. That was my favorite. Archie and his jalopies. Couldn't wait to get old enough to have my own jalopy. 47 now. Don't want any more jalopies. That's a lie. We have determined that's a lie. My mom eventually kind of got back to normal. But I can tell you that that little car was instrumental in the way I feel about those little cars. Just because I spent so much time with her in it, riding in it. And it ran like a top. My dad had done good work on it. He knew how to make a Beetle hum, man. A little engine, little 1600 that was in my Super Beetle. Me and him built together. We went and got a Delorto case, and we basically built that engine from nothing. And he knew about all the valve train weaknesses of those little engines and how to fix it. And boy, that thing would scoot and boot, buddy. I never had it legally registered or anything, but when me and my brother were living together over in Cairn Village, I think it was, off Highway 6, I used to every once in a while get a little lit late at night and get out there and fire that. I had a big old stinger sticking straight up, and dual 32 millimeter carburetors on it, and just spit, buddy. And every once in a while I get out there. We had a bunch of our neighbors were Latino, a bunch of Mexican folks at the time, and we all hung out with them. They'd party and grill, and we'd hang out in the street with them and stuff, and they'd be out there partying, they hear that garage door open, that but and they knew I was about to get up and run up and down the road in it, That thing was cool. I love Volkswagen buses. I've been obsessed with Volkswagen buses, probably from hanging out in my little special bus fort. I mean, I had some good times in there. I ain't gonna lie. One day I was like 13 years old. I went out there with a Sears catalog, made a man out of myself in that bus. It was my special place. I'd spend hours out there and toting stuff out there to have in my little hangout. And sorry, weird sound going on. We'll just cut that out. I've been obsessed with Volkswagen buses my whole life. Have only ever driven one. I drove a restored, like a 66 Splitty one time, which those are my favorites, those Splitties. But man, you can't touch a basket case for less than $8 grand now if you're lucky. Those things have basically become museum cars, and I think Gabriel Iglesias bought all the rest of them. That man got the biggest bus collection in the world, but he's got a cool setup where it's like going to become a museum when he passes on. So that's kind of neat. At least it's going back. I mean, I'm kind of torn on museum cars. I get it, but maybe if it's just the only one of something, but I would rather see cars get used. That's me. These guys hoarding their car in their garage that they drive once a year, it's a disservice, I think. Which, whatever, it's your car, do what you want with it, who am I to tell you? But I think it's a disservice to the car and the beauty and the engineering that went into it, to not just drive the piss out of it, to not just drive it till it's done, and then put it back together and drive it some more till it's done. And the great thing about Volkswagens is you can always do that. So I'm a little torn on Volkswagens being museum pieces and not being driven. I feel like, there's buses left. There should be buses left. People should be building them and driving them. I've always wanted a Volkswagen bus. I don't reckon I'll probably get one at this point, unless some wild thing happens. I hit a lick and get my Diamond Gem money. But you know, I'll probably buy a Cadillac. Because these days I do like being comfortable a little more. But the way I'm losing weight, I might can fit in a Volkswagen Bug again. I did have a Carmen Ghia. I love Carmen Ghias. My dad had a Carmen Ghia. Carmen Ghias were cool. But the Super Beetles hold a place in my heart. I wouldn't mind having another little Baja. Those are fun. Actually, I seen a kid on the interwebs had a little Super Beetle, and I think he put a Subaru drivetrain in it. The thing's insane, all-wheel drive. I was watching him stun it on the highway, and boy, that little bugger get down. That was a pretty cool build. It's a clean-looking little car. It's one of my favorite cars. I play video games a lot. I would say like I'm a gamer because I'm not competitive or whatever, but I play Forza. Forza is one of my favorite car games. And I have got a collection of Super Beetles and Forza, a collection of regular Beetles and Forza, blow your mind, Bo. Because I collect them all, build them all the bus. I got about 5 or 6 buses with different paint jobs and built different ways. And I think I even got one with a diesel in it, you know, just for shits and giggles. I do have an unabashed love for Volkswagen. And I think that started, and I think it is definitely one of the key parts to me being a car guy and why I love cars, are the Volkswagens I was around. And probably just seeing my dad handle them so well. Like, people just loved that he knew how to fix them. And I just always thought that made him really cool, you know. And it did make him really cool. It's not a thought, it's real. It did make him cool. As always, I appreciate you guys giving up part of your Sunday to hang out with me, whenever you're listening to it. I know this is time you be doing other things, time you may be doing other things if you're just listening to it. For the listeners out there that aren't watching, love y'all too, man. Appreciate it. I just found out how to start tracking all that, and boy, this thing's getting a lot of downloads. I think we're at like we're close to 10,000 downloads of the whole series. So, man, thank y'all. It's wild to me, man. I can track exactly where it gets downloaded, which is the wildest thing, right? And so there's like a dude in Hong Kong that has downloaded every episode, and I'm just dying to know, is this some like is this some displaced hillbilly working in Hong Kong, you know? Some displaced country boy hanging out in Hong Kong for work? Or is it really just a dude in Hong Kong's like, what's this? And what does that guy think about what he's watching? What could he, I fathom, maybe I need to go find a Hong Kong car guy and start watching so I can see how different we are. Maybe, I don't know, the dude wrote me from South Africa and said how heavily he relates to all this, and that blew my mind, that a guy living on the other side of the world, having a whole different experience and perspective on life, is relating this. It's kind of strengthened my resolve to continue telling these stories. Next week, we're going to go back to the GMC. We're going to finish the Jimmy. I just needed a break from it for a week. You know, I wanted to talk about something that made me happy this week. And Volkswagens do. I see a Volkswagen, I just smile. I see a Volkswagen on the side of the road, I stop and look at it. I see a Volkswagen in a parking lot, in my tracks, baby. I don't know when my last dance with Volkswagen will be, but I hope there's a few more of me. I don't know that I'll ever get my bus. I won't, like I said, unless I get that Diamond Gym money. But, you know, maybe a little 74 bay window. Of course, those are getting crazy expensive too, because there ain't no splitties left. But yeah, I love Volkswagen. And Volkswagen junkyards used to be real fun because they were hard to find. You had to suss them out. When we was working on my Super Beetle when I was in high school, my dad through work had sussed one out, and it was under the 610 overpass down on the south side of Houston. And we'd drive from A-Leaf over there on a Saturday morning. This guy had about 2 acres just full of Volkswagens, and you had to climb through the brush and the weeds to get to them, get your parts. But boy, I got all kind. I got seats, and I got little spoilers and Baja fenders and Baja front body kits, because there's just so many different things done to those cars, and you could find them all in that fellow's little junkyard. On the other side of the road, he had motorcycles. So years later, when I got into motorcycles, especially old Japanese motorcycles, you go down and see that guy some more, and he had a dude running the motorcycle junkyard. You go over there and get motorcycle parts off any old 70s, you know, Japanese bike, metric bikes, whatever. Something special about a wrecking yard. We lose more of them every day too. They're not being replaced. The EPA has put the brakes on that. That was my original goal. Was one day I was going to grow up and have me a wrecking yard, but maybe I'll just have a small one in my backyard somewhere. It seems like wherever we lived, we always had a small one in our backyard. You know, we had that Super Beetle in our backyard for years. My Super Beetle, while me and my dad worked on it, we'd push it through the gate and the fence out, and roll it in the garage and work on it. Definitely one of the cars that inspired who I am, for sure. And I love that I still love them as much as I do. They're one of the cars that still tickle me when I see one come across my feed or I hear one going by on the street. Be remiss if I didn't mention that I will be at the Palace Theater in Seguin, Texas, August 3rd, doing a big show, headlining a show there at Palace Theater. It's the first time they've ever done comedy in that theater. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm bringing my buddy Barry Laminack. He's a really funny guy, and he's going to open for me. We're going to have a heck of a good time. So if you're in the Seguin or the San Antonio area, man, I hope you come out, get you some tickets. You can go any of the links in my bio. My link tree's got tickets on it. You can go get tickets right there. Also, for those of you in Texas, in January, me and my good buddy, my Christmas is all still up there because we're still thinking we might end up going to the Middle East to do a tour for the troops. So we're kind of waiting to hear back the specifics of that and whether it's going to happen. But in January, me and my good buddy, if you follow me on Facebook, you've probably seen me talk about him, but he's a comedian named Sam Miller out of, I think, Olympia, Washington. And Sam Miller is one of the funniest people I've ever seen. He makes me laugh hard. And we became friends some months back, and we've done a few shows together, or one show together. But we have a good time hanging out with each other. So we've decided that we're going to do a little Washington tour with me and him. And we're going to do a little Texas tour with me and him. So we don't have all the dates right now, but we do have some dates. January 16th, we're going to be at the Vulcan Gas Company in Austin, Texas. On January 17th, we're going to be at the Revenant in Sour Lake, Texas. I'm hoping we're working on a Friday in Houston. And I'd like to put a Wednesday together maybe in DFW, or maybe a Sunday show in DFW or West Texas, wherever we can make it happen. Maybe even East. Well, Sour Lake's already kind of East Texas, so probably like probably DFW, West Texas. You know what? I need to talk to my buddy John Clay Wolf, because he's been wanting me to come back to Walnut Springs, and he's built that place up and made it something else. I went out there headlined one time for him, and maybe me and Sam Miller need to go out there and do the John Clay Wolf show, and do the Walnut Springs. So maybe I'll reach out to John Clay and see what he thinks about that idea. That might turn out to be and that's pretty close to Fort Worth, about 30, 45 minutes southwest Fort Worth. Walnut Springs, Texas. Reminds me of Radiator Springs. He's creating Radiator Springs out there, and it's cool. He's a car guy. I like being around car guys. I think that's it for this week. Like I said, next week we'll get back into part 2 of the Jimmy. Do some more work on this axe. I hope you guys have good weeks. I hope the things you're working towards move in fruition for you. I hope the things that are holding you back cut you a little slack. We all got them. I've been kind of going through, I was really going through a rut recently, and kind of a creative block, and I was getting tired of doing truck astrology and stuff. I mean, oh, dang, I've done 67 of them, I'm going to keep doing them because fans love them. But I was just kind of tired, kind of in a creative rut. And I watched this psychiatrist or psychologist, I watched this video. This guy said, he can tell you how to rewire your brain, how to reprogram your brain. And said if you get up in the morning, first thing you do is go in the bathroom and brush your teeth. If you brush your teeth right-handed, brush them left-handed. If you brush them left-handed, brush them right-handed. Switch it up. And then when you get done brushing your teeth, look yourself in the mirror and make eye contact and tell yourself that you love yourself 10 times. I love you. I love you. I said, what's the dumbest thing I ever heard of? But it's just one of the problems, one of the things I do, because social media is a job for me, and it does require a lot of work and a lot of upkeep. You know, I'm on 4 different platforms, a lot of followers, a lot of people to interact with. But one of the first things I would do is wake up in the morning, lay there in bed before I went to the gym or whatever, and get on social media and start interacting, working with people and checking, you know, stats and checking numbers and checking how videos did overnight and all this kind of thing. And of course, also the first thing you see is all the trolls and the negativity. And it doesn't matter who you are. It don't matter if you're fat, skinny, whatever you are. There's somebody going to show up to tell you suck. It's usually somebody that ain't doing nothing, but they're going to show up to tell you suck. And you can brush it off, and you know, you hear guys like Joe Rogan, don't read the comments. I don't like that. I like to interact with you guys, you know, when I can, as much free time as I have for that. I like us kind of being a community, especially with this thing, man, because I'm sharing some real stuff with y'all. So I don't want to be one of those guys that don't read the comments, but the problem is reading all that negativity first thing in the morning. That's a lot for your brain to take. I don't care how tough you are or how emotionally stable you are. It's a lot to take. So I said, man, I'm going to start doing this thing this guy said. I'm going to brush my teeth left-handed. I'm going to tell myself I love myself. But I'm also, when I wake up in the morning, I'm not going to turn that phone on. I'm going to do all the things I need to do. I told you I jacked up my back again a couple weeks ago, so I've been doing yoga. Just get my back right so I can haven't been back in the gym since a hurricane. But my gym was closed, you know, most of the week. They just now really got it back open. So I'm hoping to get back in there tomorrow morning. So I didn't mess with the phone. So I just got up, put music in my ears, brushed my teeth. I did the I love you thing. Now I'm a comic. I have a hard time taking things serious. And I looked at that mirror and I started out joking, making fun. I love you. I love you. I love you. Yeah, I'm an idiot, right? I couldn't take that seriously. Here's what I tell you. I don't know what kind of voodoo happened to me. And, you know, but by the time I got to number 10, it sounded like I was trying to convince myself. And I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if maybe I don't love myself or I haven't been, you know, very kind to myself. I think that's possible. I punish myself a lot, so maybe I thought, man, and my wife says, she's like, you talk bad, you call yourself an idiot, you do, you know, that's not good stuff to do. You know, I don't mean it in a mean way, it's just how I'm funny, you know. But man, it did something to me. It did something. So I don't know, man. Maybe try it. Maybe don't if you're not into that sort of thing. But I can tell you, it kind of did something kind of strange to me. I don't know what it was, but it changed my whole day. I'll tell you, that guy said if this don't change your whole day, he would cash app you $100 if you could look him in the eyes and tell him that. I said, boy, I'm gonna get that $100. No, it's wrong. Changed my whole day. Brushed my teeth. I told myself I love myself 10 times in the mirror. Every time it got done, I felt like I was trying to convince myself, but I did it. And then I went, did some yoga, stretch out my back, got my back feeling better. And then I went out on the porch and I wrote for like 3 or 4 hours straight, just nonstop. Just wrote stuff for the podcast, stuff for truck straw, stuff for other things I got coming, stuff for the special, some stuff just for me. I have one notebook where I just collect musing stuff I've written over the years. I don't know if I ever do anything with it. Maybe if I ever put a book together, it'll be, you know, utilized for that. Maybe not. But I wrote for like 3 or 4 hours, super productive that day. And by the time I logged on to social media, guess what? It was all still there. It all still needed to be taken care of. And I took care of it, knocked it out, and I had a better day. So I've been doing this for about 5 days in a row now, and I can tell you it has popped me out of my creative rut. So, man, there's something to that kind of stuff. I guess maybe you can change your wiring. Apparently I did. But I'm liking the way it's making me feel. And my back is feeling so much better from doing all the stretching every morning. So I'm glad that's giving me a lot less pain. I'm struggling with a little bit about how to handle this while I'm traveling, but we'll see. I think I'm going to record some of these, put them in the can now that the weather's kind of been cooling off a little bit lately. I can stay out here in the shop a little longer and film longer without my camera overheating. My new microphones will be here. I ordered some Lavelle mics. Those will be here next week. So hopefully next week's episode will sound a little clearer. So if you're in a rut, maybe try rewiring your brain. Some crazy little trick. Maybe just try avoid social media in the morning. I don't know, that helped a lot too, I think. Not seeing all that negativity first thing. Leave really cool comments, and I enjoy reading them, and I enjoy chit-chatting with quite a few of you. But not everybody's cool. That's just the way of the world, though. But it's a lot easier to deal with them if you're already emotionally fortified for the day and you're already feeling pretty good about yourself. And I'll tell you, I've had 5 days telling myself I love myself in the mirror, and I think I might really do, you know. Anyways, I look forward to seeing y'all next week. We're not seeing y'all, but talking to y'all in the live chat. I love it when you guys come hang out in the live chat. That's become a really fun part of my Sunday, is enjoying the release of the podcast, but also being able to interact with you guys in real time. Going to be doing some more live stuff in the future. I did one of my first live videos of the day, and it wasn't exceptionally exciting, but I think the people who were there had a good time. We all had a good time jacking and jawing, so I'm going to try to do some more stuff like that, make myself a little more accessible for people that want to chit-chat like that. I enjoyed it. And like I said, this can be a lonely job, so it's nice, you know. I don't really get to see my friends very often because we're just always busy, you know. And it's just how it gets when you get older. You know, me and my brother see each other. We live 30 miles from each other, see each other twice a year if we're lucky. It's just the way it goes sometimes. But we're about to go fishing or something. We're gonna go do something. Also, don't forget, if you got pest control needs, you know who to call in the Montgomery area, in Montgomery County, and even Harris County. You call Tim Moss, Wildlife Removal Experts LLC. They're on Facebook. Tim's a good man. He's Diamond Gem certified if anybody ever was. I'm JW. I love you. So far away, doesn't anybody stay in one place anymore?